Peace everyone, assalamu alaikum. Today we are beginning, by God's permission, with Surah al-Baqarah, chapter 2. Very excited to be looking at this surah again. It's obviously the longest surah in the Quran by far, and it's basically kind of how the Quran opens after the initial prayer that opens the Quran, Surah al-Fatiha, but this is kind of the first main body surah, if you will. And it's a vital surah which covers basically the religion of Islam, the religion of submission. And if one wants to learn their religion, this surah is really where one should start, which also makes it very beautiful that it starts kind of the Quran. So before starting, God willing, I'd like to go through a bit of an overview for the surah, which inshallah will help us to have the right angle when studying it, to have a good overview of the surah, kind of what it covers broadly, and the main themes, the argument of the surah, kind of the logic of it, because it kind of gets into a lot of details in the surah, a lot of religious practices, a lot of examples with the children of Israel, Bani Israel. So it helps to keep that overview, honestly. So actually I'll switch here to the ChatGPT window. Okay, so just if anyone's unfamiliar, usually, wa alaikum salam, peace, welcome sisters. So I just gave a brief intro to the surah, and I was talking about how we usually use the AI kind of to investigate the theme and key passage of the surah. Now, I want to touch on that before we start this surah, kind of like how you had suggested, Sister Meow, I think a while back we were talking. And so for this surah, actually, in ChatGPT, I just ask it, because it's very familiar with how we've done it in the past surahs. I just ask it to identify the key passage and theme. Already I have in my own mind what I think the key passage and theme is, but without me influencing it, I ask it to decide on its own. And in the past, it's not been so accurate, especially at the beginning, but it's gotten more accurate with time. That's probably a product of two things. The AI is becoming more advanced as time goes on, including a recent update like just a couple days ago in ChatGPT to 5.6. And also, the AI is learning from the actual chat history. It's actually getting smarter just based on this conversation as it analyzes surahs. So when I asked it for Surah 2, actually you could say like this is the hardest surah, maybe. I don't know if that's fair, but given it has the most content, it's certainly the biggest task to identify the consistent theme throughout the whole surah and to apply it correctly. And in my opinion, it did like an absolutely stellar job here. Like I could not have said this better myself. And I completely agree with what I would have said. with absolutely no prompting. It's just right, dead, 100% accurate. So not only that, but he makes a point which I would have also made. I don't think I said this point, but I would have said it because it's a very key idea. So we had talked about how Surah 1 is a prayer for guidance to the upright path, functionally. And it's like an acknowledgement that we need God for guidance, if you want to talk about like submission. Then when we get to Surah 2, it starts in a very memorable way by saying, that is the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance for the wary. So after praying for guidance, God says, this is the book, a guidance for the wary. So it's literally comes as an immediate connection and answer to the prayer for guidance. The book, here's the book, which is a guidance. You just prayed for guidance to begin, and you get your guidance. Here's also my cat making a cameo. It makes this point all by itself, mashallah. Like it says, Surah 2 appears to answer the central request of Surah 1, guide us to the upright path. It immediately presents, that is the book, no guidance, no doubt in it, a guidance for the wary. Surah 1 asks God alone for guidance. Surah 2 identifies the book as the guidance, which, no surprise, is worshiping God alone. And then within the surah, it says it shows what receiving, rejecting, corrupting, and living by guidance looks like. This is also another thing, like, I don't know if probably didn't mention this point, but guidance is mentioned an absolute bunch of times in the surah. So many times. We can count it later, God willing, but it's absolutely pervasive. It's mentioned 2 times within the first 5 verses. It's mentioned consistently, beginning, middle, end, etc. Wa alaikum salam, and may God increase you as well in guidance. So then continuing a bit, let's see. This verse, as well, this passage say, indeed, the guidance of God, that is the guidance. This is the surah's governing principle. It says there are competing claims for guidance, inherited communities, such as the Jews, Christians, whatever, desires, customs, identities, but only God's guidance is the true guidance. This is also very apparent in this verse, which I would have also cited. And they said, be Jews or Christians that you may be guided. Say, rather, the religion of Ibrahim, inclining, and he was not of the associators. So it breaks the definition, or like shatters the idea that you can be guided by being part of a community. Rather, you're guided by following this religion of not associating partners. And then say we believe in God and what was brought down to us and what was brought down to Ibrahim, Ismail, Yaqub, the tribes, and Musa and Isa and the prophets. So the belief in all of these prophets, not separating by community, because the belief is in worshiping God alone, basically, and that's what the guidance is. So if they believe in similar to what you have believed in, then they have already been guided, and if they turn away, then they are only in schism. Yeah, StreamYard link is posted if anyone wants to join. So it summarizes the main elements presented in the surah, competing claims for guidance, such as be Jews or Christians that you may be guided. Abrahamic submission, being identified instead of later sectarian identities. Belief in God's revelation without dividing his messengers. Guidance contrasted with turning away in schism. Identity received from God rather than inherited faction. And exclusive servitude, which is emphasized throughout the surah, explicitly or implicitly. Then we have the Qibla passage, which occurs pretty much right at the center of the surah, interestingly. And it says the Qibla passage turns this principle into embodied practice. It says guidance is not merely believing that God is one, it means allowing God to determine one's orientation. To God belong the East and the West, he guides whom he wills to an upright path. So it says the direction has no independent sacredness apart from God. Its significance lies in God's command and whether the people will follow his guidance rather than inherited orientation, social pressure, or their own desires. So the correct orientation is the one that is determined by God, the one that is following God, rather than inherited tradition or whatever the case, for example. And even it says لَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ in that passage, as I recall. Follow it basically that you may be guided. Because guidance and orientation, obviously, we'll talk about this soon, God willing, but there's a linkage between guidance. It's a highly directional language. Summary of the theme that it gives, Surah 2 teaches that God's guidance alone is guidance. It comes from his book, through his book, calls humanity from inherited identities and self-chosen orientations to Abrahamic submission, and forms a community whose belief, direction, worship, law, social conduct, patience, spending, which are all topics that this surah goes into, and obedience are all oriented by God. So inshallah that made sense. Are there any points that related to this people want to add? Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. That's not good. So how's the text? A bit bigger would be good, or it's fine? Text size is okay, or shall I make it a bit bigger? Because I found a workaround for the text size. Did that change it? I think it did. Let's look at it again.
Salam again. I'm not sure if it has changed.
Okay, let me reshare. Okay. I'll just go like 150.
Yes, it works just a little bit more.
Uh, just to keep everything on my screen kind of readable, I'm gonna keep it like this,
No,
and
this
we're not
one's
gonna spend
better.
much time anyway. But is there a way
Can
to
you
make
go
this
through?
window bigger?
No, it's all good. Yeah. It's just in the center. The size is the same. No, it makes no sense.
Okay.
Can you possibly go through the AI points once again, maybe in brief, revisit them while going through the text, following the text?
Sorry, could you repeat that again, sister?
Can
Your
you go
mic's
through
kind of
those
low.
points? Oh, sorry. Can you go through those points once again, if possible, following the text?
Basically,
Very, very briefly. I understand. There's a
yes.
lot.
The key, kind of, a single word to keep in mind would just be guidance, as it starts. That is the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance for the muttaqin, for the wary. And throughout the surah, the text demonstrates what God's guidance truly is, which turns out to be the religion of Ibrahim, inclined, and he was not of the associators. So God both defines what the guidance is, which is Ibrahim's religion of submission, worship of God alone, and its opposite, which is association, partnering with God. He he also dismantles, like in the whole first half, all the way to the center. I guess we'll just make the same points, but going through the section by section, it'll give the same idea. So it gives a brief section by section overview based on these themes. And now the surah starts with discussing, it kind of starts the book, and it starts by discussing itself, the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance to the wary. It defines who this book guides. Those who believe in the unseen, uphold the prayer spent from what we have provided them, believe in what was sent down to you and what was sent down before you, and in the hereafter they are certain. Then it says, those are upon guidance from their Lord, and those are the successful. Then it discusses the deniers briefly, who reject. So guidance, they basically reject guidance and are not guided. The hypocrites, who claim belief while they're internally resisting it. It says they attempt to occupy both positions, but their duplicity leaves them wandering without light. And this is actually an important discussion, because then it expands upon the Jews, who are basically a case study of this. Then we have the universal call and the first guidance. It says, it kind of goes and zooms back out and talks about the creation of man, and how from our creation and from Adam, who's also discussed at the beginning, our orientation is to worship the one who created us, created the earth for us, provides for us. And Adam's story and how he descends to earth, and God says to Adam, whoever follows them as they descend to earth, or they're sent down, whoever follows my guidance, there will be no fear upon him, and not will he grieve. And those who belie my signs, basically, are the companions of the fire. So even with Adam, already the orientation was defined as whoever follows God's guidance will be achieve salvation, however you want to put it, be successful, but those who belie will not. Here it actually cites that exact verse. Then many verses, like almost the first half, it seems, besides the intro, are focused on the children of Israel. Definitely the longest section in the Quran that is like continuously on this, I would say. And it goes through a lot of examples, a lot of signs, a lot of favors that God bestowed upon them. And so it says here, their concealment of truth or confusing of it, their breaking of covenants, selectively accepting scripture, substituting commands, hearts hardening after signs, relying upon communal identity, claiming exclusive entitlement to salvation, like when they say, none shall enter paradise except who is a Jew or a Christian. Also, they say that the fire will only touch them for numbered days. So it's the communal identity as a reliance and as the factor for salvation. And then following their desires or assumptions over God's command. It says the section is not historical criticism merely. It warns the new believing community that possession of scripture does not guarantee guidance. A people can possess science while turning away from their implication. So the contrast is between, it says, receiving the book versus allowing the book to guide. Or you could say, receiving the guidance versus following it. Then it gets to the central point, where it kind of introduces Abraham and submission, Abraham's submission, which crucially, just like Abraham, existed before the sectarian identity of Judaism, Christianity, etc. So Abraham is tested and fulfills God's words. He and Ishmael raised the foundations of the house, praying for a community submitted to God, etc. Therefore, Abraham's legacy is defined by submission. It says, when it was said to him, submit, he said, I submitted to the Lord of the worlds. Oh. Sorry, my cat is in my stuff. Okay. Okay, then we have the central verses about the Qibla, reorientation towards God. The people are tested by this sort of change of the Qibla, if you will. They're tested whether they will follow God's present command or remain attached to a prior direction. These passages emphasizes east and west belongs to God. God guides to the upright path. The community is constituted as witnesses. Oh. The believers must orient themselves towards God. Indeed, it also says, indeed, it is difficult except upon those who God has guided regarding the Qibla change. إِنَّهُ لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الَّذِينَ هَدَّ اللَّهُ, I believe, something like this.
So that was the middle, right?
Say again? Oh, yeah. Oh. Then after this section about the Qibla at the middle of the surah, it shifts into like the whole rest of the surah is addressing the believers. And it's basically like teaching the religion for the rest of the surah. All its practices, I mean, from Hajj, Ramadan is covered, divorce, charity, zakah, basically. All the basic aspects of the religion are taught in this surah, which is Milat Ibrahim, the religion of Ibrahim. As God like says, this is the guidance, then he actually gives the whole basic rights of the religion. Which again is pre-existent. Technically, it's not a new thing per se. It's going back to Abraham, including the rights. It also says there's this verse where it defines what righteousness is as not turning your face towards east or west. So it's not based on the outward direction alone, but true righteousness is your outward orientation expressed as the inward orientation towards God. And then, like I said, there's the whole latter half of the surah is dealing heavily with all sorts of things, all sorts of like rights of the religion, obligations of what constitutes the religion of submission per se, nursing, also widowhood, I forgot, oaths, menstruation, marriage, orphans, intoxicants and gambling, fighting and not fighting, bequests, meaning wills, and retaliation for like life, like life for life, that sort of thing. So it says this large legal section is not detached from the theme. It demonstrates that guidance is not an abstract religious identity. So God's guidance actually goes into the full practical application of how you conduct your life. Then the last section is more heavily focused on spending in the way of God, and I would say is the main kind of discussion. And wealth, actually, giving your wealth in the way of God, spending your wealth in the way of God. And also struggling in the way of God, fighting in the way of God, etc. All are mentioned in the last portion of the surah. There's the story of Talut and Jalut, Saul and Goliath, if you will, David and Goliath, etc. Which connects to the fighting in the way of God. There's the famous verse of the throne after that, which defines the firmest handhold is those who believed in God and denied in partners, basically. Then, like I said, the wealth and spending in the way of God. Also, debts are covered, and the day when each soul will repay what it has earned, which connects to the spending and the debts and such. And that's kind of how the surah goes into the final two verses, I believe, where it again kind of like gives a final definition of the correct orientation by quoting the believers in a prayer that they make, where they said, like, we do not distinguish between any of his messengers. I believe we heard and we obeyed. And they pray for forgiveness, that God not bear them more than their capacity, that he pardon them, forgive them, have mercy upon them. And then it says, you are our protector, so support us over the denying people. And that's how the surah ends. So it ends with a person declaring that they have taken God as their protector. So they followed this guidance, they followed this orientation of monotheism, if you will. So on account of that, they ask to be supported over those who have not done so, which are the ones who have rejected the guidance.
In the beginning, you mentioned how the beginning of this surah is somewhat of a response to the one before it, to Surah Al-Fatiha, but it seems as though the entirety of this surah is look how guidance is in the middle and prayer against disbelieving people mirrors the final verse of Surah Al-Fatiha too.
Yeah, mashallah.
Oh, there it is, right after.
Oh yeah. So I'll get to that, but basically it gives a nice, very brief summary of how guidance threads through the whole surah. It starts with announcing guidance. That is the book in which there's no doubt a guidance for the wary. it goes to examples of the children of Israel, guidance historically being resisted, then the guidance being clarified through Abraham's orientation, his religion, then guidance embodied in orientation with the Qibla and such, guidance detailed in law with the rights of the religion, and guidance lived through obedience and like submission, really, like even kind of the emotion of submission, if you will, surrendering oneself, fighting in the way of God, giving your wealth in the way of God. It's kind of the latter portions of the surah. Then this discussion is interesting as well, like we just previewed. Surah 1, we prayed to guide us to the upright path. Surah 2 announces itself as the guidance for the wary. The book is a guidance for the wary. Surah 1, we declare that you alone we serve, and we ask to be guided upon serving God alone. Surah 2 repeatedly defines the upright path as submission to God rather than inherited faction, etc., false protectors, desire, or partial obedience. Surah 2 concludes, you are our protector, so support us. So it says Surah 2 may be read as the first extended answer to the prayer of Surah 1, which is really a perfect way to put it, I think. As if to say, here is the guidance. Now the question is whether you will receive it, submit to it, and allow it to orient the whole of your life. I really find that if, like, just somebody had Surah al-Baqarah, they pretty much could practice nearly 100% of their religion, if not 100%. So any thoughts to connect to these ideas?
No, not really, but my next natural question would be, what are the elements of praise in Surah Al-Baqarah? See, since Fatiha is praise and asking for guidance, and here guidance is given, but then I think I got it. So basically, the actual the response to it is striving, struggling, and spending in the way of God, and by means of that, inaction. That's how God's praise can also be done. Because see, I can't find that much. I can't recollect probably that much about praise glorification other than the verse of the throne. Or am I wrong? Correct me if so.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's not so. In fact, I can't even think of a single verse right now that mentions it. Probably is there somewhere, but But just how Surah 1, it was starting from the praise, then following from that, declaring your orientation, you alone we serve and you alone we ask for help. Then following from that, asking for God's guidance upon worshipping Him alone. Then Surah 2 kind of functions as God giving the guidance of worshipping Him alone. So this is how you live your life. This is the orientation you follow that is in harmony with God's praise, where your outcome will be positive rather than the alternative. Which is guidance, because if there's guidance, the person has a good destination. If there's no guidance, God's praise is absolute. However, the person lacks guidance, therefore they are the ones who suffer.
This powerful argument against non-ritualism, since it mostly discusses and describes the rites, religious rites here, besides also Jewish and Christian rites. It's not that they are denounced, but rather like let them practice what they practice, and you do what God's telling you. So if you, that's the service, and if you follow God's commands, then God is taking you towards success. It explains the worship. This is the answer to you alone we worship in Fatiha.
Yes, and not surprisingly, of course, like I think I said earlier, but the guidance is still worshiping God alone, which is how it's defined. Like they said, be Jews or Christians that you may be guided. Rather, the religion of Abraham inclined, and he was not of the associators. So the guidance is to follow the religion of submission, to worship God alone. So even when we're asking for guidance, we're asking for monotheism, so to speak, as the proper definition of guidance. So I think we have time. If you guys would like to begin with the introductory verses.
Can you talk a little about your understanding of the disconnected initial letters?
Yeah, inshallah. Like after starting or just as a preview?
To begin with, possibly.
Well, I think it's better we start because that's how I would approach it anyway. So, because it's kind of an in-text answer. So I'll just read the first chunk. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون. In the name of God, the Gracious, the Merciful. Alif Lam Mim. That is the book. There is no doubt in a guidance for the wary, who believe in the unseen and stand the prayer, and from what we provided them they spend, and who believe in what was brought down to you and what was brought down from before you, and in the last or the hereafter they are certain. Those are upon guidance from their Lord, and those they are the successful. So I'll give a second to reflect and we'll start the discussion. So as far as the letters are concerned, what I notice, my main thing that I can be kind of certain about with the letters is there's a consistent pattern in all letters, I think with no exception, where whenever the letters are occurring, they don't occur in every surah, but in like a handful, they do, like a couple dozen or so. I forget the exact number, but you have the letters at the beginning, and then you have always some reference afterwards to the book, the signs, which are what comprise the book, or the revelation. So I don't think there's a single exception to that. صاد والقرآن ذي الذكر, قاف والقرآن المجيد, ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب, حاميم تنزيل, etc., etc. So all the letters are then being followed up with a reference to the book, and letters are, and then I guess from there it's speculation, but at least for a fact, there's always a connection to the book, revelation, inspiration, science, etc.
So that signifies certain portions or sections, topics, or something. Because for me, these letters are like bookmarks. They do have a certain meaning, of course, and they could refer to something mentioned further in the surah.
So apparently the ones that have Alif Lam Mim specifically, just with no other letter, are 2 and 3, and then 29, 30, 31, 32 in sequence. So I can just give a quick comparison of those ones. So Alif Lam Mim, that is the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance for the wary. Then you go to 3, Alif Lam Mim, God, there is no God except He, the living, the sustaining. He sent down upon you the book, in truth, confirming what was before it, and He sent down the Torah and the Gospel. Then you go 30, maybe this one is an example that breaks it, but anyway, Alif Lam Mim, the Byzantines have been defeated or victorious, depending on reading, in the closest land, and they, after their defeat will overcome within 3 to 9 years. To God belongs the command before and after, and that day the believers will rejoice. In the victory of God, He supports whom He wills, and He is the mighty, the merciful. The promise of God, God does not fail His promise. However, most of the people do not know. So actually this one, interestingly, does break it. I hadn't realized. I don't think there's any reference to Revelation besides the promise of God, if you were to say. Then we have Surah Luqman, Alif Lam Mim. That is the book. Sorry, these are the verses of the wise book, a guidance and mercy for the doers of good, who establish the prayer and give the purification, and from what we provided them they spend. Those are upon guidance from the Lord, and those, they are the successful. This one's like a very similar version to Surah al-Baqarah, with kind of just a abridged version. (32) Alif Lam Mim. The revelation of the book is from the revelation of the book in which there is no doubt. It's from the Lord of the beings. So yeah, those are the ones. And there's Alif Lam Mim Sad, which I think is 7, I guess. Alif Lam Mim Sad, a book revealed to you, so let there not be in your breast discomfort from it, that you warn with it, and a reminder for the believers. Then we have Alif Lam Mim Ra as well, 13. These are the verses or the signs of the book, and that which was sent down to you from your Lord is the truth, although most of the people do not know, or do not believe, sorry. So just to summarize one more time, just for my own information, like we have reference to the book after Alif Lam Mim. We have reference again to He sent down upon you the book in Surah 3. We have reference to the promise with regards to the Romans in 30. Then we have, these are the signs of the book, 31. The revelation of the book, in which there is no doubt, in 32. And that's it. So each time, except for 30 explicitly, there was the book in some form or another. And even you could make the argument with 30 that it's also a book, a kitab, meaning something God has written. He has written that this will occur. It actually works with the Arabic, even though it's not explicitly stated.
It does work in the sense that it is a revelation from God.
Hmm. So I guess since we're pretty much out of time, we can just focus on verses 1 and 2 for today, if there are any other thoughts.
Why is it that book, not this book?
This book, because it connects
No,
probably,
that book.
right, yeah, probably I would assume because it connects to the Alif Lam Mim. So like each verse, the way I see it, kind of expands upon the previous verse as far as the Quran, even though Alif Lam Mim technically, historically was part of the same verse, but it's connecting to that idea, like Alif Lam Mim, that is the book in which there is no doubt, perhaps.
Also, that's also that the letters, the initials, are undoubtedly a part of the book as well.
Yeah, and we should also note that when we say the kitab, it's also kind of like the prescription, the writing in which there is no doubt. I also find that this verse kind of starts the Quran in a sense. Besides, if you take like the first surah kind of as an opening prayer, but this seems to be in a sense like the start of the book per se. It starts it in a uniquely powerful way, which to me the first time I read it was absolutely like shocking, like so impactful. Because I had been actually an avid reader before I read the Quran. I read a lot when I was young, and I hadn't read the Quran for a long time. Until I just had the idea one day, basically like an inspiration to my mind. I probably told you guys this story before at some point, but that why have I not read this book if it's from God? So at that point, I was like, I just noticed a huge incongruity. Like, how could I not read this book? I've read other books. So I took the book and just sat down to read it. And when I started reading, I already knew probably the first surah. So by the time I got here, this is the first thing I read. That is the book in which there's no doubt, a guidance for the wary. And when I read that, I was absolutely like shocked. I instantly basically recognized that this is the speech of God. No, nobody speaks this way. And since the book has announced itself as the book in which there is no doubt, it has already like cut out doubt in it, obviously. is defined itself as a book in which there is no doubt, or the book in which there is no doubt. Means basically like its content is the truth. It's completely true, and I don't know exactly how best to express what I'm trying to say. So I kind of think of it like if you compare all books that we have and that have been written, all books in the library that is in human possession per se. Well, there's only one book that fits that it's the book in which there is no doubt per se, which is this one, which has announced itself as this way. And after this one, there can be no other, because like no other book can, I don't know how to put it, like no other book can introduce itself this way, because this is the book that has done so. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Nonetheless, it's a big claim, and the muttaqun mentioned in that verse, that's a prerequisite for guidance.
yeah, the two ideas kind of work together, I find. So the book itself has no doubt in it. That does not mean you cannot doubt the book. That means if you doubt the book, you're using it wrong. You're doubting the book in which there is no doubt. So you're severely divorced from what content you're engaging with. But who are the muttaqin? Those are the wary, the cautious, sort of. Therefore, it's a guidance for them because they are how to put it?
Well, they fear God, or they're wary of God, so they're likely or likelier to take God's guidance or God's instructions.
I mean, we have a clue later as well where it says, Indeed, those who deny, it's the same upon them whether you warn them or do not warn them, they do not believe. So those who deny, it's not obviously a guidance for them, as you were implying, but it's not because the book is defective. It's because they have rejected. They have taken the opposite position of taqwa, of wariness. They have just outright refused, rejected. Therefore, it does not guide them, basically because they reject guidance. But whoever is receptive, wary, the book is flawless, doubtless, and it guides them.
No, wait a minute. Okay, so there is nothing, nothing like a doubt. Doubt isn't even possible, so that's negation of like the whole category of any sort of doubt is just not there, non-existent. Then no doubt in it, or you take in it the guidance for the wary, no doubt in it for everyone. Um, Hence the rejectors that appear in the end, deniers. But guidance, it is only for those who are conscious of God, wary of God. You see, this, what I'm saying is, لا ريب or لا ريب فيه is for like all together. But some people recognize it and some don't.
Yes, as an attribute of the book, basically. But you can still doubt it subjectively. But it's like a sort of contradictory. You're doubting the book in which there is no doubt then. Because later God says, وَإِن كُنتُم فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَى عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ. If you are in doubt of what we have sent down upon our servant, which means if you are in doubt of the book in which there is no doubt, then bring a surah like it.
Right, so the book is full of ayah, verses or signs. So if you are in doubt, God keeps giving you more and more signs, as in verses, and you keep rejecting them. So bring a surah that is full of signs like that in the same way.
And also, just as a preview and connecting to Sister Aziza's point in the chat, there's also double emphasis on the guidance. Actually, it's kind of circular, arguably, where it starts by defining the book is guidance for the wary. Then it defines the wary, basically those who believe in the unseen, send the prayer, spend from what we've provided them, etc., etc. Then it says, those are upon guidance from their Lord, and those are the successful. So it's the reason it's circular here, which it doesn't bother me at all, and clearly is intentional, is that it's a guidance for the wary who are defined by this, and those are upon guidance. Therefore, it's a guidance for those who are upon guidance. And right, so God gives basically these attributes for a person to evaluate if they're upon guidance. As Sister said, like simple belief in the unseen, standing the prayer, spending of what God has provided them, believing in the revelation, basically, currently and before, and being certain in the hereafter. So for me, the way I think of it is like guidance is an objective thing. It is you either possess it or you don't. Therefore, if you have the qualities that make you either receptive or upon guidance, then the book acts that way. If you lack that and you're not receptive to it, hence you are rejecting, rather just dismissive and not wary, then the book will not be a guidance for you, even though it's purely true and there's no doubt in it. But the reason it's not guiding the person, obviously, is because they are the ones who are refusing. It's like I can give you perfect directions to your destination, but if you don't take my advice and you just reject anything I say, or reject that I'm correct, or whatever the case, in any context, then you still won't find your destination. So any other thoughts to add? I think we're a bit over time, so we'll wrap up soon.
I can't but think of the previous surah and how it responds to it, and basically gives an explanation of those who are astray and how that happened.
Oh yeah, mashallah, that's actually a really nice point, because it kind of expands upon the ending of the previous surah. First, those who guide us to the upright path, the way of those you delight upon. So we get that right at the beginning, these 5 verses. Then, not the way of those who anger is upon, and not the astray. We get the astray in those who denied, verses 6 and 7, and then the hypocrites in a bunch more verses afterwards, both of which are astray, clearly.
Let's further compare the categories next time, inshallah.
Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts before we close? Okay, if not, thank you all for joining. Alhamdulillah for the reflections, for the guidance, and inshallah next time we'll continue. So peace everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace. Thank you.